from Castle Rock, Colorado, ladies and gentlemen, Bill C.
Bobby says, how should I introduce you? And that was the email I sent him. He says, I'll rewrite it. It'll be better. And that's my story. And, I know, good job, Bobby. Bill Crawford, I'm an alcoholic. And I am privileged to be standing in front of you in a very humble fashion, because, spreading the message of AA and carrying that to the next person is what it's all about. It's why God gives me sober breaths every day, I believe. And, when I was first asked to do this by a couple of dear friends, and I thought, you're kidding, right? I mean, I got a 10-minute sales pitch here, but my story is, I know better stories, but it's a disease of perception, right, folks? And, the Al-Anon speaker, guy behind me goes, you got to follow that. Yeah, I know. And I don't throw knives. But I got to tell you, our stories as far as the tragedy, the soul sickness, the pain, and if you're new, I want to welcome you to AA. This thing absolutely works. And if you hear nothing else, I want to make sure I get that message across. My sponsor made sure I carried the message. My ground sponsor, sitting right in front of me there, he came to see me the day. He goes, if you get nervous, just imagine everybody naked. And I thought, well, some of my character defects like that too much. And so I'm not going to do that. But, wow. I didn't start drinking in the 3rd grade, but I could have used one. And I grew up, and, alcoholism is a family disease. God bless Al-Anons, because I got to tell you, whether you drank or not, if you grew up in that crazy, crazy world, you were affected. Absolutely. And, my dad was he was the primary figure in our family that had that disease. And as growing up as a little boy, I never felt loved. And I was sensitive. Sensitive means quick to anger, by the way. And so as I was thinking about me when I was 8 years old, I didn't really see what was going on around me. I was just too busy worrying about my shortcomings and how come I wasn't good enough. And I got this little thing, I'm legally blind. And so I can't drive a car or anything like that. So those lessons didn't come. And again, to the newcomer, please, every circumstance, every story is going to be a little different. Listen to the feelings behind it. Because drinking is but a symptom of how I feel inside and how I run from it. And, so I grew up and I had this physical thing that was different that set me apart and just validated why I hated you guys. And, when I was in high school, I was about 15, and I'm a middle child, and I got a younger sister and an older brother, and my brother's only 14 months older than me. So, you'd think we weren't that different, right? we're close in age. But again, I've got this physical handicap that my ego tries to overcome. Doesn't work out well. And so, and I just didn't feel a part of. And one day I come in, and my brother is drinking, with one of his friends that day, and he says, hey, his buddy says, let's get your little brother drunk. And, I'm included? Yeah, I'm all up for that. And they were playing quarters, but it wasn't beer. They got into his friend's dad's liquor cabinet, and it was every hard alcohol mixed in the shot glass. And I was about 90 pounds, 15. I'm only 150 now. And after about 4 shots, I was 6'6", 240. And, man, I took that kid, and I remember shoving his face into the concrete, and told my brother what I thought of him, and man, life was good. I had found the answer. I didn't have to be afraid anymore. Alcohol worked for me from the gate. And it started there, and my first drunk, it wasn't all that. I mean, I almost blacked out, whatever. We did, but as you go through high school and you start with, the other kids, and, maybe it's just beer parties on the weekend and things like that. And I was always a weekend drinker, take off Wednesday. And so it got to where, I liked alcohol, but, I wasn't at that point where it was, what the book would call a potential alcoholic. I was in my learning phases. And I was having fun. A good speaker out in California, Father Tom W., he says that there's 3 stages to drinking. There's fun with problems, and there's problems. So I'm in the fun stage, right? You guys remember the fun stage, right? I'm bulletproof. There's no problems in the world. I'm a teenager, nothing bad can happen to me. And it just goes to where, I was on the 4.5-year graduation plan because I was in no hurry, and I just didn't see what was happening. And there were some things that happened in my home life. My dad eventually decided, his wife was getting in the way of his 3 girlfriends. And so he left. And, the dynamics, my sister was only 3 years old. And she used to wake up at night crying how her legs hurt, and we'd take her to the doctor, and there was nothing physically wrong with her. But she didn't know how to express her pain. And she didn't know how to let you know that she was broken, that her heart had been broken, that her hole in the soul was festering. And my brother, again, he started running on the streets, and I'm not trying to tell their story, and when I was 19, I just graduated high school, and I came home one day, and there were police in my living room. And my brother had been in a drug deal, and someone had gotten killed, and he went off to prison. And my family, the disease of alcoholism just tore through my family, just tore through it. And I was just trying to manage my feelings as best I could. I remember when I was 16, my mother said, "What do you want for your birthday?" I said, 4 cases of Michelob, please. Michelob, you believe that? I think I like the silver thing on top. And so, I'm doing the alcohol maintenance thing, and again, and I don't see any problems with this. Okay, I mean, there's no real consequence yet. I remember when I was 17, again, I'm in high school, and my brother decides that, you should sell marijuana cigarettes at school for me, bring the money back to me. And that lasted a whole day, and I got caught, because I'm legally blind and I can't see them coming. And it was a great idea, And so they take me to the dean's office, and I'm sitting there at the dean's table, and he's shaking his finger at me, going, "How long have you been doing this on my school campus, young man?" I said, "1 day." And I got a wad of money in my leather coat. And he goes out to call the police, and I got to hide this money. And there's a 3-tier paper tray on the dean's desk. So I take my money, and I put it under the paper tray, and I go off to juvenile hall for 2 weeks, and I come back to get reinstated. He goes out to sign the reinstatement papers. I lift up that paper tray and my drug money on the dean's desk for 2 weeks, and I pull it back out, and I put it in my pocket, and I'm thinking, I'm pretty smart. This is not a problem. This is a little speed bump in the road of life. And again, we alcoholics, the ego, I'm not much, but I'm all I can think about most of the time. And so I go on, and it doesn't faze me, and then, I'm 20, I'm 21, I'm 22, and not all, but most of my friends, they kind of outgrew that stage. And I didn't. I stayed, and it just got worse. And, but again, not seeing the consequence, just having some fun. I remember we used to go to this bar, and on Sunday nights, it was nickel night. Okay? Any well drink or any draft beer was a nickel. I had a buddy who lost 3 jobs because of that promotion. And, and we're just having fun. We're not in the problem stage yet. And I remember one night, it was a Friday night, and we're at the bowling alley, and it's a bowling alley full of people, and instead of a beer frame, where lowest score buys the next beer, we said next person who loses that frame has to bowl with their underwear down around there. And so there I am out there at the foul line on my BVDs throwing gutter balls, and I get 300 people looking at me, but I don't care. I'm having fun. I'm bulletproof. And then the problem started, and the fun slowly came to an end. And there was more and more problems, and I carried deep resentments, and and it ran my life. I went to an Al-Anon meeting early on in. This guy was talking about how in Al-Anon they like that phrase, let go and let God. And the guy says, I just can't do that. I hate those. And so the guy says, well, let go and let God get him. And I was like, I've been to very few Al-Anon meetings, but I catch those little phrases, My wife says, I have no opinion on that. Well, I do. And so I'm in my early 20s, and I'm barely holding down a job because I work for an alcoholic, and that's the thing I think for me was I didn't see myself as an alcoholic. I mean, I was what we call a functional alcoholic. I always had a job, always had a place to live. It didn't cause any real damage that I could see. But the internal damage, in the 8-step and the 12 and 12, it talks about writing that list of people we have harmed, and it says that. What kind of harms do we do others? And it says we may not recognize the harm that we do others as being that grave, but the emotional harm that we have done ourselves will change us and will twist our emotional behaviors and personalities for the worse. And that gradual hole in the soul was eating me. And it got to where beer was like tonic water. It was just something to fill in the shots of the hard stuff. And, it just started to progress. And, I think I was 27, 28, and it's 4 a.m, and my Mrs. Right Now, my living girlfriend, is yelling at me, and, she's got a crack pipe in her hand, and she's 3 months pregnant, and I'm throwing her stuff out the door, and I don't see any problems with this as long as I can get her out of my life. And I'm burning my life down around me, and I'm just trying to maintain, and that Mrs. Right Now thing. I love the Al-Anon stories because they talk about relationships. How we go from one to another. And us alcoholics, if she only knew how much I loved her, she'd change. No, Bill. She wouldn't change. And, when I got here, in California, they had this thing, and they said, no relationships in the first year. And Mickey B likes to say relationship stands for really exciting love affair, turns into outrageous nightmare, sobriety hangs in peril. And I go, okay. Right? So I need to keep to my side of the street, but I like your side of the street. And so I'm burning through relationships, and I just little touch of juvie. So there's not real consequences that I can see. There's no handcuffs on. Can't get the DUI because, again, I don't drive. But, I hear the stories about the alcoholic cart. I had the alcoholic mountain bike. And, that was 21 gears, 3 of them worked. And handlebars were never really quite straight, but neither was I. So it didn't matter. And, I would weave home from the bar, and I'd be really proud of myself, make it all the way there and hit the mailbox, and I broke my arm in a blackout once and just went home and kept drinking. Went to the doctor the next day. And so the damage that I thought I was doing was, basically myself. But, again, I was trying to maintain. And, it was funny, that night that I was bowling in my underwear, when I was leaving, this woman comes up to me, and she's a couple bowling lanes down, and she says, "You are a blast. I have to party with you. Here's my phone number." Right? Okay, cool. So I get off work the next day, and I go home, and my brother had taken that phone number off my dresser, and he'd called her first. She's already there partying with him, right? She doesn't remember me by this time. Anyway, they wind up dating, and she moves in, and I live with her, and because my brother's there, and then she moves out. Well, 7 years goes by. I hadn't seen this woman. I'm getting to the end of the drinking part, and I run into her. And she says, "Hey, I haven't seen you forever. Hey, take my phone number." She's 6 foot blonde with breast implants. What do you think I'm going to do? So I take her phone number, and I'm not thinking spiritual thoughts. And so she says, "I'm 2 years sober." I said, "That's nice. Get away from me." And so a week later, I go out to dinner with my family, and there she is again, with her family at the table right next to us. Coincidences, right, guys? And she says, "Hey, you didn't call me. Take my phone number again." So about a week later, it's a Friday night, and I'm lit. I'm all lit up. And I get home, and I call her. And she's just with her boyfriend. And but she says, let's get together tomorrow. And I won't go into too much detail. Anyway, so we spend the whole day sober together at the park. I got a hangover, and the sun is too bright. And she's telling me her story. How she has a 4-year-old daughter that she almost killed in a car accident, and how her drinking took her to the depths of despair. And she drank like I did. I knew her. And that kinship through suffering that the book talks about, where I know that you know. And I said, how'd you do it? And she said, well, do you think you're an alcoholic? And I said, whoa, let's not say that word out loud just yet. Now, I'd like to quit drinking, but I can't do it on my own. She says, if you mean that, there's power in those words, and I will take you to a meeting. So I didn't get here, all happy-go-lucky. I was kind of chasing a skirt. But when I did get here, I was done. See, I wanted to be done, but I didn't know how to be done. I didn't have the courage. I tried to look up AA in the phone book one time. AA, it's right in the front, right? But I couldn't find it. And willingness is the key, newcomers. And so, I go to my first meeting, and I got sober in Los Gatos, and it's Sunday morning, and there's 250 at that home group. And I walk in, and all the men want to hug me, and I'm thinking it's church, right? But I sit down, and a guy who's got 20 years tells his story, and he's talking about how he gets 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, and he gets his chip, and everybody claps, and he says, but you guys don't know how to celebrate, so he goes and gets drunk to celebrate his chip. And everybody's laughing, and I'm laughing, and I hadn't laughed a good belly laugh in a long time. And I related to every single thing that was said in that meeting, and I'd been in AA for 40 minutes, and I stood up and said, I'm an alcoholic. And I grabbed this thing with both hands. And I couldn't believe it. They said things like, get in the boat and row. Take the cotton out of your ears and put it in your mouth. Okay? Get a sponsor. I got a sponsor. He says, you're going to work a step a week. You're going to get a new sponsor. You get it? I said, yes, sir. And he would show up at my house on Sunday afternoons, and the ink would still be wet because I'm an alcoholic. Right? And we got to my third step, and he says, now, do you know what you're doing? I said, no, I really have no idea, but I don't care. I'm not going back. And I wrote my fourth step because I knew by the grace of God, and that grace is an unmerited gift that is given to you by your higher power, that gives you the clarity and the courage to do what you can't normally do. Because I wanted to be sober. Couldn't do it. And so I wrote that fourth step because I didn't want to feel the way I had felt. And I didn't have to, they told me. And, it just grew and grew. And I got my first sponsee when I was 9 months sober, and he worked all 12, my very first guy. You know how rare that is? And he saved my life. He'd come sit on the couch and we'd read the book. And, this is a service-oriented assembly. And, I remember I was a secretary of a meeting once, and we passed the basket, and we'd always announce, if you have a court card, put it in the basket, and I'll sign it when it comes back, because we took 7 tradition first. And this guy walks in and he goes, hey, I'm not court-ordered, and I don't like when you say that. Look, I'm just doing my job, man. But service has always been a very, very interesting thing to do. And I remember in our big home group, 240 every Sunday morning, and I was the cleanup guy, and we had 5 coffee pots the size of, so I had a cleanup committee. I would love that. But we were getting in trouble because we were leaving the cigarette butts outside from the town, so we had to tell everybody to go across the street to the park to smoke. So they made me the AA police. So I'm standing out front one day, and this guy's, and I said, excuse me, sir, but can you go? And he says, I'm not in AA. Because he is court-ordered, and he's not happy about it. Anyway, so that's some of my service stories. And it's just amazing. I get a year. Amazing. I get a year. And it happened to coincide with a couple other people in my home group, because big groups in California. And so we actually rented a hall, and we had a DJ, and we threw a party. We like to throw parties. And I remember my whole family came. I couldn't believe it. My mom was so proud. And I got a stack of letters from everybody, and they all said, we're proud of you. And I started crying like a baby in front of all of those people. Because even at a year out deep inside, I was still ashamed of myself. I couldn't couldn't face what I had done to them, to me, to who I was. How the hell did I get here? I tried to go to junior college out of high school, but when I started drinking, all I wanted to do was drink. I had aspirations. I wanted to be somebody, so I thought. Not when I started drinking. So there I was, crying like a baby. And, my sponsor, when I was working the steps the second time, he says, Bill, there's two kinds of shame. And there's normal shame where I do something I'm not proud of, and that's normal. But then there's toxic shame, that where I am completely deep down inside ashamed of who I am as a human being, and that ain't right. I'm a child of God. When I got here, I thought I was terminally unique, and today I am beautifully unique, just like everybody in this room. I don't have to hang my head, right? I don't have to be ashamed of myself. When I do something wrong, I 10-step it. Okay? A friend of mine and I were reading the book today, and it was talking about in the 12-step my mind's going to drink, working with others, and it says that there are people who have religion and they know a lot about religion and they've got great theology, but yet they continue to drink, and it says they either don't have the right kind of faith or they don't know how to put in practical use the faith they've been given. And that's what we have here, folks. We have steps for practical use. Okay? And again, Mickey Bush, I love this because he says, when I got here, I was so sick, I didn't know how sick I was. You know how sick that is? And that was me. And and he says, do you think I went to the bar and I said, bartender, I'll have a double because I can't stand who I am and I hate my life? No. I want to numb the pain. No, I don't know these things. My brain, when I got here, I was for the first good 6 months, I was still on the fence with you guys. I'm kind of on fire, but I don't get it. And I'll quote the other great theologian I know, Homer Simpson. And Homer was asked by his wife, honey, would you rather have a beer or internal peace and harmony? And he thought, well, what kind of beer? And I get that. A Bud or a Heineken. And so, our thinking is a little different. It's a disease of perception. Because remember, nobody bent my elbow for me. Okay? All right? Now, granted, some terrible things happen to us sometimes. I went to the state convention last year, and I was in a meeting about 120 people, and the topic was sex. Well, we love to talk about that, don't we? And the guy says, raise your hand if you've ever been sexually abused. And I swear to you, 40% of the hands went up in the room. Now, I'm not trying to get outside issues in here, but shit happens. Stuff happens to us here, people. But it's how I react to it today that is completely different. I have a tools for living that hopefully can transcend the problems. So I'm at a year, and I meet this woman. And she takes an interest. And remember, no relationships in the first year, so I'm being cautious. And we're out one time, and I'm with some friends after the meeting, and she's standing there, and she says to me, honey, sometimes when you speak, it's quite clear that you don't know what you're talking about, but yet you keep speaking. And she married me anyway. And she calls that her untreated years. Sorry, she's right behind me. God bless Al-Anon. And so, at 4 years, I went from the Bay Area and I moved out here to Castle Rock. And I'm like, oh God, small town AA, Jesus Christ. And, you don't have microphones. We love microphones. You don't have podiums. It's not a big deal. That ego is cunning, baffling, and powerful. And my sponsor says, if you're anonymous in here, you're dead. So when you get there, I want you to share the message. I want you to tell them where you came from, what you learned. I want you to sponsor. I want you to get a service commitment. I want you to put your feet to the ground. So that's what I did. And I don't think there's too many people in Castle Rock that don't know who I am by choice or force. And a lot of my friends are sitting in the front row. I know they've all heard my stories, so I my condolences. And then, I've worked the steps a number of times, and I remember, that the release that you get from working those steps and becoming a new person. You know, I worked a set of steps with my sponsor, the second set, and it fundamentally changed who I was inside, how I looked at you, how I looked at me, how I forgave myself. And that was a big key point, because self-loathing and self-destruction, in my opinion, is what alcoholism does. And, you know, I don't live that way today. I don't have to live that way today. And that's the message I want to carry. And, you know, I've had some good tutorship. I've had some great sponsorship. That's what saved my ass. I told my good friend Kellen, I said, you know, you can only work the steps so many times, because, you know, the steps, in my opinion, are made to give you that psychic change, that change the way you think. So service is what's really going to keep you sober, because it's the work I can do on a daily basis. You know, and again, change the way I think. The book says I have to have a psychic change sufficient enough to bring about recovery. Okay? Wow, that's tough. And, you know, I remember I'm thinking about me, and I'm thinking about more, and I'm thinking about grandiose. And I remember I heard this joke. The guy goes into an AA meeting and runs to the podium and he says, "Science has done it. If you take this one little pill, you'll be relieved of all your alcoholism." And a little voice in the back of the room says, "What happens if you take two?" You know, and I thought, yeah, I get that. I get that. I heard a guy say, you know, if beer commercials make sense to you, you might be an alcoholic. Yeah, I get that. You know? We came out of a meeting once, and my friend says, you know, I got a resentment against her. And I said, why? He says, because she looked at her watch while I was sharing. I said, I get that. So, my thinking is the problem. Okay? And through a number of works of, you know, a set of steps, and I get to slowly, with work, change. Remember, practical use. That's what that book says. Okay? In step 2, it says we have a faith that works. Okay? And, you know, my son, my beautiful 7-year-old, now 8-year-old son, you know, 8-year-olds have a pretty vivid imagination, and they like to tell stories. Drives his mother crazy. And he's lying. And she looks at me, and she says, I know where he got it. And I'm getting better. And it was funny. It was a couple weeks ago, and he's in the back of the minivan, and he says, you know, Dad, I've noticed lately I haven't been lying near as much. And I thought, all right, we're making progress. And you know, it was funny because he was getting in trouble in school. And I went into his room late one night, and I had to have a talk with the young man. And I said, Connor, I said, look, you know, what happened to the good boy you used to be? You're getting in trouble, you know, this, that, and the other thing. And he got quiet. And then I left the room, and he started crying. I went back in, and he says, you know, when you said that, you know, I used to be a good boy, it made me think that I'm not a good boy anymore. And he had that, and he doesn't mean the way he acts. Toxic shame. He had that look. And I said, Connor, I said, sometimes what we do is not who we are. And you are a beautiful little boy who loves people, and God loves you, and Daddy loves you. And his eyes lit up, and he said, okay, Daddy, thank you. And he went to sleep. That's recovery. That's what you people gave me. That was the message that I never heard as a child, and that I couldn't tell myself as I was growing up. That I would be okay. That because of what I was doing, didn't mean that who I was. I didn't have to be that person. And, you know, the gifts of sobriety that come one day at a time just far outweigh anything I could have imagined. You know, I got a group of guys, and you know that know me, and it's pretty amazing. And you know, 9 years married to the same woman. You know, before I got sober, I didn't have a relationship that lasted more than 6 months. Because, you know, I'm an alcoholic. You know, we date, right? Get you, use you, lose you, get drunk, get laid, get to know you. You know, we do it all backwards. And so I had no relationship skills, okay? And I was just trying to take the focus off of me. And, you know, and I remember when I met my now wife and my sponsor at the time, and I said, you know, I'm really scared to get married. He says, what are you, stupid? She's the best thing that ever happened to you. What are you afraid of? Well, everything. And And, and the ego that comes in, the fear of the unknown. And it's just amazing. And I look at, I look at where I was and where I am now. When I got here, my 6 favorite words were, yeah, but, what if, and I know. Now it's trust God, clean house, and help others. And when I got here, it was, yeah, but I'll do it different next time. Never happened. Well, what if I just change? No, that never happened either. And I know. Oh, still, that one gets me. When I need to call my sponsor, my brain says, what do you call him for? I know what he's going to say. And the trust God part, my best story, letting go, practical tools, letting go of the result, okay, and dealing with it one day at a time. My best story about that was a friend of mine told me a story about an old Chinese farmer, and he's got one son and one mule. And he's out in the farm one day, and the mule runs away. Everybody goes, oh, that's terrible. He says, well, maybe it is. Maybe it isn't. The next day, the mule runs back in the corral, and 15 wild stallions follow him. Right? And the next day, his son breaks his leg. And everybody goes, oh, that's terrible. He says, well, maybe it is. Maybe it isn't. And the next day, civil war breaks out, and then the soldiers come to take his son away off to war, and he can't go. And to accept life on life's terms, not trying to figure out God's will. God's will for me, in my little pea-brain conception, is just to do the best I can one day at a time, to be the best Bill I know how to be. I heard that lady earlier. She's given her, her report, and she says, where does God's will stop and my duty to say the right thing begin? And I think my will is clarity to do the next right thing. We have developed what they call that sixth sense. Sight, sound, smell, touch, taste. Number 6, an overwhelming knowledge and just downright in the heart feeling that I have a higher power that loves me. Okay? And it says on page 55, deep down inside every man, woman, and child is the fundamental idea of God, but only in that last analysis, there he is found. And I had to clear away that wreckage. I had to write that amends list. I had to do that work so I could get in touch with that. And I remember when I was a kid, I don't know where I got this, I'm not religious, and I used to always think if I could just be a good person, God would accept me. And when I got here, it took about 2 years, and I realized that it wasn't about God accepting me. It's about me accepting God. And it just got amazing. When I was year 4, in 18 months, I quit my job, went to school, got married, bought a house, had a child, moved to Colorado, and got 2 more jobs. I couldn't get off the couch when I was drinking, okay? I had to have a 6-pack and 100 proof half pint to get to the bar. I couldn't do it. Paralysis by analysis. I would overthink everything. How am I going to get sober? How am I going to change my life? Oh, God, I got another drink. It's stressing me out. And the amazing part is if you just take direction, and put a little action, it's amazing. And today, I remember my first year of sobriety, every meeting I chaired was about gratitude. And, I could go, oh, I hate gratitude meetings. Oh, God, no. And my best gratitude story I ever heard was I was at a New Year's Eve talent show back in California, and the guy says it was right after a couple years after World War II, and this woman was traveling around the country, and she was a Dachau concentration camp survivor. Anyway, she survived. And so she would travel around the country and give talks about what it was like. She wrote a book. And she told this story about how they were in this little barracks, about a 10 by 10, and there was about 15 women crammed in this barracks, and they slept on wood pallets and the whole bit. But, and someone had snuck in a Bible. And they would read that Bible every night, and that gave them comfort. Okay? And she had heard, it said in the Bible that she should be grateful for absolutely everything. And she says, I can be grateful for the wood pallet because I'm not sleeping on the floor, and I can be grateful there's a roof over my head, I'm not out in the field, and I can be grateful for a lot of things. But because of that close confinement, they were infested with fleas. Fleas were just eating them alive. She says, I cannot be grateful for the fleas. And as she was traveling around the country, she got done talking, and one of the gentlemen in the crowd was actually the very German guard who stood outside her barracks. And he walked up to her and he says, I was there. And she says, yeah. And he says, I knew you had that Bible. And she says, well, why didn't you come in and take it? We could have all been shot for smuggling that in. He says, because of the fleas. So, when God gives me bad days, they're not really bad days. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. And when I hear someone else carry the message like she did, and she said, I took them to, and I watched those AAs take her, and I watched the change. And it's amazing. I mean, what happens here, the recovery that happens here, we all hold hands at the end of the Lord's Prayer to signify that we need each other. This is a we program. That by myself, I am back on that couch doing nothing. Okay? And, on the back of our coin, of course, unity, service, recovery. And, it's actually an old ancient Indian symbol that means mind, body, and spirit. And the unity is about me being with you. Because if I'm not with you, I'm left with me. Okay? So the unity and then the service, of course, the giving back. And only when those two happen do I finally get the recovery of the mind. Soundness of mind. We always hear that, insanity is doing the same thing and expecting different results. And I heard a guy say, no, insanity is doing the same thing and knowing it's not going to be a different result. And I did that. I know that. I can relate to that. And, there's a line in Bill's story, and he says, drinking went from a luxury to a necessity. And it got to that point where, you had to drink. I know what it's like to get up in the morning and say, I'm not going to drink today. Drinking by noon. Don't want to. I'm going to have 2,000. And it just, that's just kind of how it happens here. But again, when I take that unity, service, and recovery and I intertwine them all, I get to do amazing things. And that faith that happens, that spiritual axiom where I come to that point where I am no longer alone. When my daughter was 4 months old, she got an infection and she was in the hospital. And they had to do a spinal tap and a catheter and several... If you want to know what powerlessness is, watch them take your 4-month-old little girl and stick a needle in her spine. And she had to spend the night. And I remember... I was on my knees and I'm on the concrete floor in that hospital room. And I just asked God, whatever your will is, please let me accept it. See, because again, I don't get wrapped up in asking for this or asking for that. Before I got here, Santa Claus was my God. Give it to me, baby. And God's got a big sense of humor. My first sponsor, his last name was Kringle. Okay? And his family ran the Frosty the Snowman Christmas tree farm in the Santa Cruz Mountains. And I thought, you gotta be kidding me. So I listened to Santa for that first year, and I got everything I ever wanted. It's amazing. It is utterly amazing. And then, like my grand sponsor says, I get to become a citizen of the universe. I get to give back. I get to pay my taxes. I never even had a bank account until I got sober. I flew under the radar. Okay? Pain, shame, criticize, and complain. Compare. That's what the disease does. When I separate myself from you and I live with me, I get sick all over again. This is a one day at a time deal. Okay? That's what it is. But the gifts of sobriety, again, I just can't stress it enough. I mean, again, gratitude all day long. And to hear people share that message is just amazing. And, there's a line in the 12 and 12 in the 11th step, and it talks about the sunlight of the Spirit. This is where you hear the term, and it talks about a beach where you will lay and imagine yourself, and where that overwhelming love will come to you. And I love that. I love that 11th step because it talks about how, meditation is limitless, and it's a personal journey. And so there I am laying there in my spiritual Speedo, and I'm imagining God, and then the phone rings, But it's amazing that my world has now become three-dimensional, that I'm not killing myself one day at a time. I'm living in the solution one day at a time. Okay? And my sponsor, we were doing the Lord's Prayer one day and holding hands, and he says, his little saying, he says, love is a circle that holds us all inside, where strangers are like family and loneliness cannot hide. And alcoholism is a disease of loneliness. And today, I'm so far from lonely. I love you guys.
As Bill sees it, ladies and gentlemen, Bill sees.